As I've spoken to a few of you about Standard 2 and the standard about iterative design, it's become clear that I need to define some things and explain a few things in a little more detail so that you can understand them. Here on the screen you can see the essence of Standard 2. You can see the descriptors for the C+, for the B+, and for the A+. To get started, we're interested in the C+ descriptors, and so we want to make something that very clearly communicates the three things that you can see there. The first is that you design and iteratively develop something that is a computational artifact. The second thing is that you show the iteration of a single part of that design over multiple versions. And the third thing is the purpose. You want to explain the background of why you went through the design process or why you went through these multiple iterations in order to arrive at the final version. A computational artifact is anything produced by your computer or using digital tools. It could be a program. It could be an app that you developed using a bunch of tools on your computer. It could be the result of running a program for one of the assignments or tasks for this course. If you have any doubts on whether something you've created is a computational artifact, just ask me and I'll let you know. For our purposes, we refer to iteration as trips around the design cycle from start to finish. You have an idea. You do a little research to find out about it or how to create what it is you're trying to create. You plan it out, you actually make it, and then you start to test it out in some way. This does not have to be the entire project that you are building. It can be one part of a project. Maybe you would like to learn how to use a certain technique in programming. And so you have the idea for what you want to learn. You do some research to learn that idea, you put it into use in your project, and then you test it out to see if it works the way you originally intended. That is an iteration. That is a design cycle. I also want to talk about prototypes versus products. A prototype is something that you build to see if an idea will work. It could be a quick sketch. You prototype different ideas along the way toward developing a product. And a product is something that you want to get into the hands of users. You're not worried about it falling apart. You're not worried as much about someone using it incorrectly. It's ready to solve the problem that inspired its design in the first place. So as you go through the design cycle, as you iterate in producing different prototypes along the way toward a final product, you want to present evidence of those different versions along the way. Here are some versions of a game produced by a previous student, Gwen, in app development. So you can see she had an idea for a game. She started with a sketch, and you can see elements of her initial sketch that are in the final version that's all the way on the right. But that first sketch is complete. It has the essence of her idea. It's all there. The next thing she did is she started coding. And so she was learning, doing some research, experimenting to see how she could take the idea from the last prototype, that was her sketch, into actually making it using code. The circles represent light bulbs. The player in the game is represented by that orange rectangle. When the player was in contact with one of the light bulbs, it would actually turn off. You can see all the way on the right-hand side the final version of what she made. It's a little more polished than the previous prototype that she put together, but you still see elements of what worked from the first two prototypes there in the final version. So these three versions are what I am talking about when we think about viewing different iterations of an idea. This is a set of iterations for visual design. A student was, again, building a game, but decided to focus on different versions of a character within that game. You can see that we started with a sketch on paper. It was turned into a slightly more complicated version on the computer, and then as the idea continued to develop, this student was able to add color and then details. But in all four of these cases, they are part of a complete design, and within themselves, they are complete. So these are multiple versions of the lap counter that I built for Mark Rober's course on creative engineering. You can see we started with a version that was hanging from a cable. It's not a good idea to just leave it hanging from a cable. To a second version, which was able to sit on a table, and a third version, you could set it somewhere and it would work. In all three examples, though, we have a complete design cycle that was part of producing those 3 examples. It isn't like the first version didn't work. It did, but that version was made better through multiple trips through the design cycle to arrive at the version that you see all the way on the right. In these examples, you can see development over time. As the prototypes are produced, you're reaching a higher level of sophistication and effectiveness in solving the problem related to the element of the design. Each version could be used in a final design. It just might not look as polished. It might not work as efficiently or be as elegant as the final design. You see the versions moving from being very rough to being more polished and more effective over time. I want to be clear that we are not talking about something that didn't work and that then starts to work. That's not a complete design cycle. That right there, if that's all you're presenting, is a straight line. So as you work through identifying what you're going to use to demonstrate your skills in this standard, I want you to think about what in the projects that you have completed for this course has resulted in multiple versions of your idea. It could be you going from a rough sketch to a polished sketch to a final version that you presented in a design report. This is distinctly different from a design report. A design report is to show the state of a project at the end. It doesn't have to tell the story of how you went through the entire design cycle or went through multiple design cycles to arrive at your final version. That is the purpose of this standard. This standard is all about telling the story of creation across multiple iterations. And so your job is to figure out what in the work that you've done in this class so far tells a clear story with multiple versions of an idea as you go from a prototype to a final product. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help.